What's wrong? What do you do about it? And how do you do it? What's wrong? They threw out God and country. They threw out saying these thoughts that have to straightening up your emotions, willing the good of another person, and doing it because Christ rose on the third day. Excuse me. What do you do about it? Well, you go back to God and country. You become a good citizen, and then you become a good husband and father. And then it spills into things such as a judicial court, a court that will establish facts that are true as true. And home economics. It's home economics that we want, uh, where home economics is the smallest economic thing. The married couple becomes the economic brick of society. 10-year-olds can't pay for their moms. Moms can't take care of their kids and go out in the workplace that way. And husbands can't go out and work and run the household. And so there becomes one person, and you take it from there. That's what we're after here. Good morning if you're in Australia. This is coming to you from Tucson, Arizona. It's Saturday afternoon here. And hello if you're very late in England and in Los Angeles. I'm hoping some of the people will call up from different countries because it's the same concerns. So if you're a gal, and perhaps you're a single gal and you have a child, and you're beside yourself because it's going to work out, because it's not working out, it's not going to work out. There's no way you can make it work out. And the idea in the 70s was how they had a revolution in the 70s, and they pushed us into something called the consumption society. And they kept it up, and now it's coming to fruition. We're just hitting bottom. The people that cashed in on it all are living in the foothills and collecting rent from you. And chances are you're beside yourself. You have to come up with money for rent and pay somebody else to raise your own child and healthcare and everything else. You can't do it. And so if you're a gal, try and find picture yourself in the 1950s. There's a 2.2 children and a hubby to take care of. And if you're going to be a professional home economist, you're going to have a house to live in. So if you can, next time you're driving, you see one of the houses that was built in the 1950s, that was built for this sort of thing. How much is a mortgage? You don't pay rent. You don't pay rent to people. You don't pay rent from people. You don't rent property to people. You don't rent from people. You own your own house. And how much are clothes? How much are food? If you're going to do the consuming, then if you're going to do the producing, you do the consuming. So you get to go play. Once a kid gets into school, you get to have recreation time. You get to go into the country club and play tennis and have a massage by some guy named Borg and that sort of thing. So we're hoping someone will hear this and start calling in. The same with a guy. You ask how many hours you have to work. You have to have a job that produces something, like a plumber. A plumber produces something. Some guy that buys property and rents it out to other people doesn't produce anything. He's the bad guy. He's the enemy. He's outside of the normal supply and demand curve and that sort of thing. And if you go back from about the 1970s, when there was a revolution and everything happened, everything came to fruition around then, you realize that the guy, our plumber, our guy that went back and asked the 10-year-old what he wanted for his birthday, they had to start working more and more hours. There's something called the lazy V. It went like this. People cashed in on it. There's a guy. He knows how to manipulate people and intimidate people. And he marries a gal, and they decide to cash in on it all. But in the 70s, they still made enough money to support a wife and children and pay the grocery bills. And so when the gal went out to work, her income was extra. And those guys, being scoundrels, instead of what did they do? They got into a duplex. And they started renting out the duplex and got somebody else to pay their mortgage for them. And that was the thin edge of a wedge right there. It pushed people in the lower part of that huge middle class into a class of peasantry and they had to start renting, and housing prices went up, and more people had to rent, and that's how you get the lazy V. You can look and you can see houses from the 1950s around here, and see suburbs, and you can see how clean and they were very endearing. And then you can compare them to communist housing projects and apartments, and you'll see a noticeable difference. Let me say that again. Go back into those houses in the 1950s, and you can see society cashing in on it all. And after houses went up as much as $2,000 a month, and now that adjustment's made, you can see people buying houses that are worth $50 million in places like Malibu. And then you can see abandoned neighborhoods in places like Detroit, abandoned houses. And that's what that lazy V is. There's a lazy V. There's a line that goes through the middle, and that represents the large middle class. Taking the leadership style of washing the feet of the apostles, the architect and big business guy, he puts you in your own house. You take your hand, push away, subsidiary. He puts you in your own house. This neighborhood's that way. It was built in the 1950s. Our dad was a repairman, and this is a 3-bedroom brick house in a half-acre lot. Next door is a plumber. 2 doors down was a milkman. They built houses for themselves. The people who did the producing did the consuming. And the hotshot guy, like a sack that's inside out, he takes the lowest position and he organizes everything and puts you in your own house. That was all thrown out. So, excuse me, I was trying to make, there's a lazy V, there's this line right here. This represents a large middle class. These guys who cashed in it all causes these people down here, that causes poverty. But when these guys take over, the middle class disappears. These guys can't exist. These guys come into being, these guys disappear. When the middle class guys take over, these people, poverty disappears. It pulls them up. But these guys, the upper class, they can't appear. These guys are enemies. It's one or the other, one extreme or the other. You're either living in the foothills collecting rent or you're in the ideal world the United States tried to have. And after World War II, they were trying to do it, and they threw all that out. So I'm hoping somebody will hear this and start calling in. We're going to try and go live tomorrow at 9 o'clock, or 10 o'clock, I think, tomorrow morning here in Tucson. So it's 9 o'clock in LA, and about 5 in the evenings in Great Britain. And so we're hoping you'll hear this and pass the word. We're hoping people in Australia will join, because the same thing happened here that happened over there. They threw out home economics in favor of individual rights. They threw out a judicial court, a court that will establish facts that are true as true. They replaced it with a sophistical court, the definition of which is to establish facts that aren't true as true. And it simply worked. We're just like all the other countries now, and it's a nightmare. We're paying the price. And so is Great Britain, so is Australia and Mexico and a few other places. Home economics is when this is the smallest economic thing. So picture a 1950s house and go off to the side, and in a very stereotypical fashion, start with farming and mining, and then above that, manufacturing, and above that, wholesale, retail, and repair, and above that, retirement, education, and recreation. And doctors and lawyers form a kind of lattice that holds it all together, and it's the priest that causes it all to come into being to begin with. This is a God and country thing. The Pope holds the moral high ground, and this is just an extension of it. So you don't realize it, but all of the stuff we think of as normal and intellectual, it's a Catholic position. Catholic is what I think of it when I think of the university professors and law and the idea that we're normal and well-adjusted. Being normal and well-adjusted is not a natural thing, any end a religious thing. Go back to courts. Courts throughout God has sexual revolution, and they threw out the idea of a decency as a formal argument. They made it okay to start making money by causing people to have to work more hours. When you think of it, it goes something like this in the very philosophical sense. We were Yank, and you can't be a Yank without being religiously Catholic, but you can't have religion in government. So they threw out religion, they threw out being a Yank, and they started acting rationally. But acting rationally, you rationalize a psychopathic nut living in the foothills and being a professional consumer. It's just where the rational ends. If we're just a bunch of animals, that's what you do. They couldn't care less about the world going on after they die. And that's just what happens is famous philosophical stuff. We actually live in the stereotypical definition of a satanic church. And so go back and say, okay, we're a bunch of Yanks here, and we'll be a Yank. We'll be Catholic, not because some guy named Christ died and came back from the dead. We'll just be Catholic anyway. And it still doesn't work. So you take the next step and you say, okay, we're going to Catholic, universal. Catholic is the standard itself, like saluting a Navy officer here in the States. They salute the rank and not the person. And it's the rank, the routine, the shtick itself, pardon me for that, the rank itself that represents moral high ground. The Pope holds the moral high ground, so it's the moral high ground that you hold. And so going back to our example, they'll be Catholic, and so without Christ, and no, you can't do that. And so they should have said, okay, we're going to be Catholic, and there's Christ dying and coming back on the third day. There's that, forgive me for this, superstitious stuff, but that we hold, but there's more to it than that. So they should have been in some physics lab trying to figure out what it's all about. In other words, they should have held Christ's divinity as faith. And in the most famous of famous arguments, that's what faith is. Holding Christ as faith, that way out there. And then you become a normal, well-adjusted person, and then a good husband, good father, and a good citizen. And if you choose married life, if the gal chooses to raise a family, then she gets the sex and she gets a house, she gets the song sung about her. As a professional citizen, a professional home economist, and an amateur tennis player. And with those things, they can do wondrous things. How many farms are there? How many mines are there? They can arrange things. The priest who takes a vow of poverty maximizes profits. They know just what things to do to get this huge middle class. They threw it out. So I'm hoping that someone will hear this and start passing the word. I'm hoping that someone will start chatting in and saying, I'm a gal, this is what I need to raise a family. This is the budget I need if I have a husband and children to take care of. And this is how many hours I have to work if I'm a young man. I guarantee you, it'll be more than 40. They always talk about a plumber, but it may be other things as well, such as a guy who drives a forklift in a warehouse. If you're that sort of person, how much do you make, and how many more hours would you have to work in order to come up with that? Here in Tucson, it's more than 40, it's more than 80, it's far more than that. I tried to go on the computer and figure out if there was a gal and she made $50,000 a year, which is outrageously high around here in Tucson for a single gal. And she has a child, just one child. What are her expenses? And they end up with about $900 for daycare, watching somebody else raise her child, and another $800 or something a month for health care. And then that doesn't include dentists, and that doesn't include deductions. And groceries are outrageous. By the time you don't get very far, you don't go very far until you realize it's way past anything she's ever going to make. Communist factories are that way, aren't they? I've heard an awful lot of lectures and an awful lot of speeches. I've never once heard anybody say anything good about working in a communist factory. Very few gals want to spend their life putting their child in a daycare center just so they can go off and work in the factory. But there's an army of gals that insisted that you do. And what did they do? They were never in the workplace. They simply moved into the foothills and became the upper class. And you can call that upper class communism, and that's what they are, or fascism, any other name. Those are just names, labels. Excuse me. The same with the guy. Nobody wants to work in a communist factory. There are words that describe that kind of worker. A peon is one of them. And they work to produce things for the class of intelligentsia. And nobody wants to work in them, and there's good reason for it. But if you came here to the United States in the 1960s, people would line up to get into a factory in a Ford plant, for example. That's because people went to war to get women and teenagers and old people out of the workplace. And you made enough money to support a wife and 2.2 children and run a household. Life was easy. It didn't take much money to put shoes on the kids' feet and that sort of thing. If you recall, I remember one, I can't think of his name, but he was one of the dictators in the Soviet Union, a Russian dictator. He came over in the 50s, and one of the things that stopped him in his tracks that was the huge parking lots at the Ford plant. I think it was Ford. They never conceived of the idea that there were so many people who worked in the Ford plant actually made cars, and they parked the cars in the Ford plant. The idea of people working in the factories producing things for themselves wasn't in the communist sphere of things. Repeat that a handful of times. The whole point of communism, they would say, is for the people and for the people. And that's not true. It's a very vicious Twilight Zone bum's rush. Think of slavery, American slavery. There's a big, beautiful mansion, and there's all the slaves living in the slave quarters. You can call them housing projects or slummed apartments. And then you go rushing into the communist world only to find that the state is actually the group of people that live in the big house. And you spend your life producing things so that they can consume them, everything for the state. And then you wake up as if you were watching the Twilight Zone. It took 10 years in the Soviet Union just to get a car, and you don't buy cars for yourself. The only people that drive cars are people in the ruling class. They don't go away. It just goes on and on that way, doesn't it? In athletics, they would give the girls steroids and testosterone without asking them. And why? Well, so they would have super athletes for the state. The fact that it trashed the girls' life, they couldn't care less. Same is true here in the United States. The budget causes all this starvation and all these people to live in misery, and they couldn't care less. The fact that they cause people to starve is something they weaponize. You better give me what I want, or those people over there are going to starve. On the other side, they're caught in this pickle, aren't they? To add insult to injury, they arrange things so that the other side looks guilty. I've heard that lots of times in my life at the level of a personal, everything's coming out my fault. These guys hustle me and it comes out my fault. And that's very true. It's the same thing. The routine a pimp uses to recruit a prostitute, same thing that communists use, same thing they do at Washington, other places. Well, I'm going to go off the air. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in Tucson, 10 o'clock in Tucson time, 9 o'clock in the West Coast. And I'm hoping someone will hear this. I'm hoping you'll start to chat. And I'm hoping you'll start to speak up. What kind of budget do I need? This is what I need to run a 1950s household. And I'm a guy. This is how many hours I would have to work in order to come up with that budget. Gone is the 8 to 5. We'll bring that back. Okay, hope to see you tomorrow. See